Meg, what's going on? Dr. Meg, it's good to have you back.
Go ahead. It's so fun to be with you. I really love being on your show, Larry, because we really get to the meat of what we want to talk about and no dicing or mincing of words. We just go right to where we need to go. So I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm too, and I agree. This is round three for us, which I love. But I really want to start out with something that when I first heard you say it, it was so powerful for me. And you spoke at our summit a couple years ago, and it was so powerful for the guys. And that is, dads have everything that they already need inside of them to be a great father. And I would just love for you to expand upon that.
Oh, you bet. I think that this is really important to know because, again, when I wrote my book, Hero, a lot of men looked at the title and go, no, 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 I'm not a hero because they thought that being a hero was, being strong and successful and they had to be good at sports. I said, no, what you need to understand is in your child's eyes, you're a hero. You get that title, whether you earn it or not. And so I say the same thing about dads. Dads are wired with everything they need to be a great dad because what kids need and want from their dads is vastly different from what dads think they want and need. It's simpler, it's cleaner, um, but it's hard. And I always say great parenting is simple, but it's hard. It's very hard, but that's okay because it's all in there. It's all in there. And I think my job in part is to sort of, if you think about dads having all the wiring they need, my job in a way is to come along with a little electric rod and go bzzz, and fire up the electricity. And they're off and going. They don't need me anymore.
So when it comes to, are you saying the desire or the skill, or what is it that we
Both,
already have? Okay.
both. Okay.
Okay.
Both. Okay. So basically, kids need four things from their dad. They need affection, they need attention, they need affirmation, and they need acceptance. Every dad can give those to his kid. But from the time you're young, those instincts and desires are tamped down, if you will. From the time you're in early elementary school, middle school, you are told, no, 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 you don't, you don't be emotional, you don't cry, you don't connect with people on a deeper level. You're a man, man up, which basically means shut your feelings down. And then you put on top of that the barrage, onslaught of negative messages that dads have gotten over the past 10 years, which are so toxic. And they're driven by a social agenda. They are not driven by science or parents or people like me. I'm not a psychologist, but psychologists, psychiatrists. It is driven by a social agenda that says women and other minorities are the ones who have the power. And as long as we have power, you don't. So we have taken dads and pushed them aside. And I like to say, thrown them into orbit around their homes. So you couple the fact that many dads feel like they don't really they belong in their home, but they need to sort of take a back seat to what's really happening, what mom is doing, because she sort of knows better. And then you take a man who's been trained from early on, don't be emotional. Emotions are for women and children, they're not for you. Nobody would say that, but I see this in my husband. It's okay for me to be emotional and me to cry and me to say that I need help, but he's the one who sort of stands back a little bit. And I think when you live with those two things, it's very hard for a dad to tap into the things that he needs to give his kids, like real attention, which is connection, real affection, which is emotional, and affirmation. Sure, he can affirm whether his kid is good at soccer, good at football, or if his daughter's good at dance, whatever. But to affirm a daughter as a young woman whom he loves is a lot harder, but every cat dad can do it. It's just you've been trained not to. That's all.
Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that? And when you say social agenda, I would love for you to expand upon that because I mean, I have felt that as well. I know a lot of men have felt that. I mean, I even look at like, the Al Bundys, the Peter Griffins, the Homer Simpsons. Like, it's almost like we're trying. It's almost like society is pinpointing dads as like
Yep.
you're dumb, you're less than, you're not equipped, you don't have what it takes. Basically, the mom runs the show. You have no idea what's even going on under your own roof.
Absolutely. And, not only that, now it's if you're Caucasian male and you're a dad, and you have a healthy marriage, you might as well hang it up and go live in a different country because you're worthless. And from where I sit, I'm a child advocate. I know what kids need. I've been doing this a long time. So let me give you a little bit of a history lesson because I was there. I'm old enough to have been smack in the middle of the women's movement, the feminist revolution, if you will. In the 1970s, women said, you know what? Our mothers were all stay at home moms. We don't want that. We want to do better. This isn't right. We want to do what men do. For good or ill, we want to do what men do. And that's when the sexual revolution started. So the revolutions came together. Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan said, women, forget men. You outdo them, you outshine them, you outsmart them. You get into the workplace and you show them what real talent is all about. But listen to the mantra of the movement. Women said, we need to be on top. We don't want to be just equals. They'd say that, equal rights of men, but it really wasn't about that. It was about women beating men. And the idea was you can't have two strong people. You can't have a man and a woman be strong together. Woman has to outdo it. So women had to get in the workforce. Women had to then be able to, run the home and bring home the money to run the home. And then it was women became, well, we are everything to our children. Guess what? We don't need a husband in the house. So then single motherhood became in vogue. And I'm not talking about single motherhood who women who are living in poverty and their boyfriends ran out on them. I'm talking about women in Hollywood and women, earning a lot of money who said, we are so talented and we are so capable. We don't need men, and we certainly don't need fathers. Now, they weren't considering what their kids need. They always say, oh, we put our kids' needs first. No, they don't, because kids need a dad. And so then this moved into the 90s, and then we moved into the 2000s. And over time in the early 2000s, men got pushed and pushed and pushed aside because women gained power, if you will, financial power, workplace power. And 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 then we started to see, okay, well, women are there. We've pushed men aside. Who else can we throw in the front? So now what we're doing is we're throwing other, quote, minorities into the front. We're saying they need to be treated like everybody else because this isn't fair. And whenever you push another group of people to the forefront, what happens to the men? They get pushed back. And that's why this vitriol against white, educated, smart dads has arisen. It's a social agenda. It's not one that stems from anyone's instincts, and it's certainly bad for children. It's certainly because we have all the research up and out the wazoo, as much as you want it, on how important dads are to kids, and that if kids don't have a dad in the home, they're more likely to be depressed, flunk out of school, not going to college, be poor. The list goes on and on. And yet, we're living in a culture that says, "Go away, we don't need you." And so that's reality versus a social agenda, and it's got to stop. So that's why I came forward and said, hold on, let's consider kids. What do kids need? Kids need strong dads.
What does a strong dad look like? I mean, I know you gave those 4 things,
Yep.
but give me a like a situation. I mean, I know you've been in practice for a long time, and what you've always said, which I love, is like, I know dads, but what I really know is kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you think of a success story or you think of a kid who's just beaming because he's got an on purpose father in his life, what is that kid saying about
Yeah.
his or her dad,
Yeah.
his or her dad?
Well, again, if you because I ask kids about their dads all the time, and I'd say, "What do you like about your dad? What do you dislike about your dad?" And kids never mention salary. They never mention what kind of car he drives. They never mention what kind of house they live in. As a matter of fact, most kids prefer smaller houses than larger houses, which a lot of dads want to give their kids, which is a bigger home because they like a tighter knit family. Um, and so they never talk about that. They talk about things like, "Oh, you know what? My dad is so great. On the weekends, he takes me fishing. My dad is so great because he tells wonderful jokes and he makes me laugh. My dad is great because every night when I go to bed, he reads me these series of stories and I just love it." So let me give you an example of a child or a kid who has a strong dad and what that dad looks like. And it would be pretty easy to do in this culture. We have a daughter who is in the fifth grade and she is wanting to fit in with all of her friends, and all of her friends are beginning because she's sort of getting ready to go to junior high. And one of the things that parents do now is they treat their kids as though they're older than they really are. So she starts dressing like she's in seventh grade, which means smaller clothes. And she wants to do the things that all her friends are doing, like have a cell phone, be on social media. Big, big, big deal. There's a big war going on. And every mother that I talk to says, "I know, I hate social media. I don't want my daughter on it. But," and I say, "What's the but all about?" "But all of her friends have it." Well, that's a big old excuse. Now you have dad come along who doesn't care as much about kids being upset with him. When he knows what's right for his kids, he'll do it regardless of the child's feelings because he knows that feelings aren't what really matter in the long run. So dad'll come along and go, "You know what? I know you want a cell phone, but here's the deal in our house. Nobody has a cell phone until they're 15 or 16." And the daughter screams and slams her door and hates her dad. Mom runs along and said, "How can you do that? How can you don't understand. She's going to be an outcast now." And dad says, "Nope. I know I want my daughter to grow up to read more, to spend more time with me, to spend more time with the family, and that's the way it is." That's what a strong dad does. He's not a jerk, but he knows what is right and good for his kids and he stands his ground. And he's not bullied by peers or a spouse or his kids. He just knows what needs to be done. It's painful for the people at the time because there are a lot of things now that our daughters and sons are up against, which are, as we talked about at the beginning, toxic to them. Toxic. And the dad is the one who needs to come in and say, "You know what? Dressing like this when you go to school in ninth grade is not appropriate. So I'm not going to let you dress like that to go to school." Again, mom runs to the door. "How can you do that? How can you do that? You don't understand." Maybe I don't understand, but I know boys, and she's 15. She's not going to dress like that to school. So dad is the one who just sets the line, sets the boundaries, and makes no qualms about setting them and sticking to them.
It's
Sorry.
interesting. No, you're good. When so the story I'm telling myself is I agree with everything you said, and I think that I'm actually currently going through that right now with my oldest, where we're actually course correcting a lot, and I stand my ground. Like so, I'll give you an example. My 18-year-old is sort of in this season right now where his cell phone is directing a lot of his attention, even though he has a screen time and all this other stuff. but a lot of things are getting put on the back burner, like his grades, keeping his room clean, his laundry folded, like, and his tasks and the things that he has to do. And I've had many conversations with him of like, hey, we need to come up with an agreement, a way of operating here. And what I think that this should really look like is, I'm okay with you having downtime. I'm okay with you watching YouTube if you want to. And now, granted, his YouTube, his Snapchat, his social, they all have screen limits. So they shut down after so much time. But I always tell him, I'm like, look, because he's actually doing this thing where he'll get very creative. So he'll do Snapchat for a little bit, that shuts down. Then he'll do YouTube for a little bit, then that'll shut down. Then he'll go to like Netflix or whatever. The phone in general and his discipline around it is suffering a little bit. We're in this season. So I've told him, I was like, listen, I'm okay with you having downtime and I'm okay with you having phone time. Like that's really all okay. And it's not okay if we're doing it at the expense of other things that absolutely need your attention. And here are those things, right? And we've had many, many talks about this. And like last night, he kind of was like, he's like, I don't want another lecture. I was like, you know what? I don't want to give another lecture. I don't. I was like, actually, what's really funny? And I told him this last night. I was like, I actually hate this part about fatherhood. I hate it. I was like, I don't like it. I was like, no one ever tells you that this part, like I remember growing up and my mom was hard on me or somebody or a father figure was hard on me. And I always thought like, God, they must really enjoy this. And I can tell you from where I'm at, I hate this part of it. I was like, but I also know that in order for you to be successful, it's important for you to have a guide, someone who's going to give you a lot of soft, cuddly, warm love and some tough love when you need it. And I am that guy. I am not your friend, but I really want to know your opinion because here's what I'm struggling with. And I think a lot of dads are struggling with. How can I hold that standard? Right. And not be looked at as like, "Oh, you're the dictator of the entire house."
Mhm,
Like, and you're the bad guy.
mhm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And he may call you a dictator, and he may call you over controlling, and he may call you all sorts of names. But if you know it, first of all, you're smarter than he is. He's 18, but it doesn't matter because he doesn't have full brain development. And so you need to be there to offer him good advice because he doesn't know a lot of what the outcome of his behavior is going to be. Many kids, even that age, have a hard time comprehending that if they do action A to D, if they do action A, that in 2 months it's going to result in consequence B down the road. That's hard for them to kind of wrap their minds around. So what you do as a dad is rather than saying no to everything, you pick 4 or 5 things that are non-negotiables in your home. Okay. Phone should be non-negotiable. You own it. You pay the bills. Even if you own it, he's under your roof. Okay. It doesn't matter. He can do whatever he wants to do when he goes out and lives on his own or goes to college. But you pick 4 or 5 non-negotiables. You talk them through with your wife and you say, here's one of my non-negotiables, phone use. Here's another one, the way our son speaks to us. Here's another one, how that he can't come home at 3 in the morning routinely. So you come up with those and you set a firm boundary. You can call it a rule, but it's a boundary. And you say to your son, here's my boundary and here's why. Because I know that if you spend X amount of time, it really affects your brain development, and it does. And I want your brain to develop very well, and that happens through reading and music and engaging with mom and I, whatever. But I know that I can't be with you 24/7. So here's the deal. If you cross that boundary, this is what's going to happen. I take your phone away for 2 weeks. So, and this is the good part. So I hope that you never put me in a position where I need to implement the consequence. Now, who's in charge? Him. See, I can't be with you. And so if you decide to cross that line, then this is what's going to happen. So the control becomes his, not yours. And that's a game changer.
I agree. Yeah, and I love that he is the one who is quote unquote in charge.
Yep.
He decides of whether or not that consequence, gets
Exactly.
it,
Yeah.
yeah,
But you've drawn the line in the sand,
right.
and a good father doesn't move the line,
Mhm.
even if it embarrasses kids. I probably told you, Larry, my dad was quite strict about dating when we were
Right.
yeah, and my dad, on more than one occasions, told a guy to leave our house, and I hated him. And this isn't like I was probably 17 or 18, and I wasn't, 15 or whatever. And I just thought, you were like the meanest father in the world. No one else's father did that. It wasn't many years later that I looked back and I was so grateful and felt so loved that my dad set a firm boundary that I hated at the time, but I realized when I was mature enough, he was acting in my best interest. So if you're acting in your child's best interest and you draw a line, do not back down. Because if you back down, your kid is going to go, see, I can manipulate my dad. I can get him to do whatever I want because he's really not going to give those consequences. Which, by the way, a lot of mothers will cave before dads because they can't stand the temper tantrums that kids give when you give them consequences.
I agree. I think that, it's interesting in our house. My wife is just as tough as I am, which is great,
Good.
but I know that that's not necessarily the norm.
Mhm,
I wanna talk more about the culture that these kids live in. You know, I, we've got TikTok, we've got Snapchat, we've got Instagram, we have all these different social media handles, and I think I'm not trying to globalize every parent like this because I know that there's a lot of parents that have a lot of strict things, but I think that there's a lot of like, well, if they're out of my hair,
mhm.
so I don't have to deal with them. Like they're just on their phone. Every other kid's on their phone for 8 hours a day and or playing a video game for as long as they are. So, then that's just the way life is now. But I challenge that. I really, really do. And but what are our kids up against? Like what are some stories that you've heard around social media or and I would even love for you to link this to anxiety,
Mhm.
depression, demotivation, all these things that these kids are taxed with that parents just don't realize
Yeah.
is a consequence because of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and what's in many parents' minds is that, you know what? I know there's a lot of bad stuff being on social media, but my kid's a good kid and they're responsible. So I really don't have to worry about them. And I say, it's not about your kid. When your child is put, and I'm talking mostly about girls now, on social media, you open the world to them. Okay. They don't even have to do anything but just turn on, um, Instagram, whatever. And so parents say to me, when's a good age for my child to have a cell phone? And I say this: when you're ready for your daughter to have a 50% chance of seeing pornography, when you're ready for your daughter to be at much higher risk for being sex trafficked, because Instagram is a big place where girls get sex trafficked. When you're ready for your daughter to have a marked increase for risk of depression and suicide, give them a phone. We know that we have so much great data coming out that we didn't have 10 years ago or 15 years ago. We know that the more time a girl spends on social media, the more likely she is to become depressed. Now, depression is linked to anxiety. So it's actually, they track, they're parallel. So a girl's and I've seen this in my practice. I actually had a 15-year-old girl come in to see me after she was released from the hospital because she swallowed a bottle of Advil because she was tired of feeling like she didn't meet up to the standards of her friends from social media. When you think about it, nothing positive for a girl happens on social media because developmentally, when she goes on, and adult women do this too, you automatically compare yourself to to all of your friends, and you never measure up. You never measure up. So, and I would challenge every parent and dad who is listening, Go on social media for 15 minutes, stop the social media and see how you feel. You feel kind of, ugh, and you feel that was a waste of time. And chances are, if you're looking at your own friends, you feel worse about yourself than who you really are. So so this girl actually admitted to me in the presence of her mother that social media played a big part in her suicide attempt. Okay, now studies bear this out. So I said to her, okay, well, what we need to do is we need to have you on a social media diet. And that diet is going to start with fasting, no social media for the next 2 weeks. I can't do that. And I said, well, okay. But, and I looked at the mother, but you need to do that. You tried to kill yourself. And her mother said, she just won't give it up. That's a weak mother. That is a terrible mother to come in and say something like that. So we know since COVID, we have an epidemic of depression and anxiety among kids. We know that depression is directly linked to social media use. Okay. And everybody's saying, oh, what's wrong with kids? What's wrong with kids? But there's another reason spending too much time on your phone or a screen leads to depression. It interrupts healthy relationship. Basically, men and women, girls and boys are are born to live in relationship. We're not to live in isolation. Okay. So the at our core, what causes us to move forward and to embrace another day and to have joy in our lives and contentment in our lives is a healthy relationship. But social media and phone use dramatically disrupts that because it takes our attention away from the person in the room, and it puts it onto a machine, a picture of a friend, words of a friend. That's not an authentic relationship. It doesn't meet the needs of any of us in forging and forming authentic relationship, whether it's a man, a woman, anybody. So you couple the toxicity of social media on a girl's self-esteem and how it can fuel depression, then how it interrupts a relationship, not just with her friends, but with her parents. Then you've got a mess on your hands. And I would say to this to all the dads out there: when you walk in the home and your daughter's in a room, and you walk in and you're texting somebody or on your cell phone, you walk right by her, she feels invisible. Every daughter who feels invisible to her dad feels she's not worth anything to her dad. Now, I'm not saying you can't be on the phone in front of your daughter, but the more time you spend on your device in front of your daughter, the more invisible she feels. And how many times I see dads and mothers looking down at their phone, doing something, and the kids there. My 2-year-old grandson the other day actually walked into the kitchen, and I was on my computer doing something. He walked up to me, said my name, and I said, I'll just be with you in a minute. He took the top of my laptop and slammed it
Wow,
shut.
really?
Yep. Slammed it shut. He needed my attention, and he was right. So, all of these factors together, kids feeling invisible, kids feeling that their parents don't want to give them their time and attention. When you hand a screen or an iPad to a kid, they know exactly what's happening. They know you don't want to deal with them. You want them to go away and just leave them alone because they got stuff to do. It's the babysitter. We know that, they know that, and it feels pretty bad to them. Keeping your kids off of screens takes a lot of energy, emotional energy, and mental energy. And also it's hard because now you've got a kid who wants to be on their phone at 8 o'clock at night, and you say no, and they're mad. What are you going to do with the kid? Well, over time, they'll stop being mad, but then you come up with some creative things to do, talking, playing a game, whatever. And at first, kids will think it's really dumb, but I guarantee you over time, they'll come to really appreciate it and they'll feel better.
So, I mean, we really, really, really have to model this.
And I will tell you that Kids hate their parents on phones more than parents hate their kids on phones, because kids need something from their parents. They need their attention. They need their affirmation. They need to feel that they are somebody to their mom and dad when they walk in a room. So when they don't get that attention, and again, I'm not saying you need to hover over your kid and tell them how wonderful they are all day long. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about authentic connection, authentic attachment. When kids don't get that, their whole sense of self changes. That doesn't happen with you or I because we don't need our kids for anything. We're developed. We know where love comes from. We've worked through self-esteem issues. We know, why we're loved and if we're loved, and we've worked all that through, but kids haven't. So because they're very vulnerable to getting what fathers give to them, that makes them in a much more dangerous position, when in a fragile position, when dads ignore them because they're on a screen.
Man. I mean, so we really, really have to walk the walk when we're doing this.
Yeah.
And I think it's that is really, really tough. I mean, for us because and I think that I don't know if it's the society we live in or what's going on, but like we've never been more accessible in the world than we are now. And I know even like, for people who their jobs, right? They're connected to their phone and their email and all that other stuff because they're trying to get tasks done and work done. And I think a battle that a lot of us face as men and providers, especially if your work is done digitally or
Mhm.
remotely
Yeah.
or you have any type of work that's digital whatsoever, is there's that battle of like, okay, I need to be here and I need to be present. That's super important. Like that's more important than anything.
Mhm.
At the same time, I can't neglect my work because then I'm not providing. So
Mhm.
like that's and I think the answer might be somewhat simple, but it's not easy, which is like as much as you're trying to create boundaries for your kids, we have to be just as diligent to create boundaries for ourselves, correct?
Bingo. You know, when I raised my kids, I didn't have to worry about a cell phone. Now it's difficult because our patient charts are on a computer. So typically, my husband and I come home from work, we have dinner, we sit down, and we're staring at our computer, typing things about our patients. But here's the deal. You have to literally make a schedule for yourself, particularly if you work at home. And unless you're going to work 60 hours a week, which you can easily do if a lot of your work is online, you have to say, okay, here's my workload. Okay, I'm going to work 40 hours a week or whatever. And from 7:30 in the morning until 4:30 at night or whatever, I'm going to pour it into my work. When that time comes, I shut my laptop off and I turn my phone off, because the truth of the matter is nobody really needs to talk to you. Nobody really needs to text you. If something's urgent, then they can get hold of you, text your wife or whatever. But the truth of the matter is it's very rare that people are urgently need to talk to us. So if we're not living a disciplined life, how in the world can we expect our kids to live a disciplined life? And the reality is connecting with your time with your kids and spending time with them and really being present is a discipline. It's not something you just hope happens. You literally have to shut screens off. And I would say if you are putting your kids on a screen diet, say from 7 at night to 9 at night, or 8 at night to 10 at night, whatever, you need to be on the same screen diet, because you can't ask your kids to do something you're not willing to do.
Right.
And so, but it's hard. But see, I've lived a part of my life to know how wonderful it is not to be attached to my friends all the time. I hate it that people think they should be able to get hold of me whenever they want, and I better respond to their call within half an hour. when did that happen? I thought, I don't want you to be able to get hold of me. If a patient needs to get hold of me, that's okay. But guess what? We're on call. If I'm not on call, you need to talk to one of my partners. And so we blur all these lines. Blur all these lines. But what happens if you work at home is you take all these breaks during the day. You're on a screen. Oh, I'm going to check this. I'm going to check who said what on this. And before you know it, you've wasted an hour of work time. And now you have to make that up at night. But guess what? Now that cuts into your kids' time. So that's why we need to be really diligent and literally make out a schedule from when we're going to be on a screen. And that includes your phone and when we're not, and to be
Yeah.
disciplined.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I agree with you 100%. Kind of a funny story. I took my kids camping. It was me and 6 boys this past weekend
Mhm.
in Bull Shoals, Arkansas. And we did some fishing, we did camping, and we show up to our campsite, and there's not a phone charger
Love it.
within several hundred feet of us, right?
Mhm.
So, like, my kids actually did find the phone charger, but they had to walk, like, all the way to the bathroom, and then they had to, like, plug it in if they want to do it, and then
And the
after a while,
bathroom, yeah.
they were just like, "This is
Yeah.
too much trouble."
Yep.
And I'll tell you, nobody had screens, and we had a little bit of screens because we were doing photos and that kind of thing, but
Mhm.
nobody was, like, scrolling aimlessly through stuff. And we played games, we sat around the fire, and we we played this game where we had to tell a story, and we went in a circle. There were 7 of us, so it was me, my 4 boys, and my 2 older ones had 2 friends, and each person had to say 1 word, and we basically had to make up the story. So it's like once upon a time, and then, like, it was the funniest thing that I think I've experienced in years. And even my 8-year-old and my 10-year-old were there, and we were laughing so hard at the ridiculous stories because everyone only could say 1 word as we made up this story and go around in a circle. Like, there was, like, this antelope that was great at jump roping, and, like, it was just so, and it went on and on and on. We did, like, 7 stories,
Mhm.
and we were laughing to the point where, like, we couldn't even, I had tears rolling down my eyes.
Mhm.
My 10-year-old had tears
Yeah.
rolling down his eyes, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, and my 10-year-old was like, we got back home, and you think, like, we've been outside, we've been camping, and he was just like, "That was so much fun. When do we go again?" And there was no screens. We
No.
brought, Old Maid, we brought Spot It, we brought Sorry, we bought Frisbee and Can Jam and everything else, and it was just a blast. And there was hardly a screen to be had, which
Well, and that's the whole point. When you're face to face with your kids and you have to have a conversation or you have to have find something to do, all of these wonderful things come out. And if you haven't spent a lot of time with your kids and you're face to face, maybe you start arguing. That's a good thing too, because you work things through. But I will guarantee you, when your son is 30 or 35 and he has kids, excuse me, that will be a memory that's seared into his memory bank that he will be so grateful he had.
yeah, we're already
Yeah.
planning the next one and we can't wait. But this was such a good reminder. I want to bring up one other thing too, and then we'll wrap up here. But and that is something that we talked about when I was on your podcast. And actually, it's kind of interesting. I'm always pleasantly surprised, but we have a lot of female listeners that listen to Dad Edge, which always, like, I'll get emails, and we've gotten Apple reviews and from women, and we have quite a few women listeners. And I think that what would the last direction I'd like to go here is how wives speak to their husbands. And I think, you and I talked about this on your show, but I would love for you to share, like, a way that women can speak to their husbands that's super empowering,
Yep.
in a way that maybe they don't really understand or realize how badly they're cutting them down.
Yep.
But I would love for you to talk about that.
I love to, because here's the thing. Many of us women feel very dissatisfied and frustrated with our husbands. You don't pay attention. You don't listen. You're not engaged. Studies show that women still bear the lion's share of the work at home, whether we're working outside the home or whether they're not. And so that sets up a lot of frustration in women right from the get go. And so often when we talk to husbands, there's this underlying agitation. And there's this, I felt this. Oh my, I'm really speaking from my own experience in my own home with my husband. And so you come into conversations already primed. The pump is primed for what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And many times our frustration comes out as putting a putting a dad down because we're critical. I can't believe you said that to the kids. I can't believe that, you didn't bathe so and so before they went to bed. I always bathe them. Why, if you were here more, you'd know that. Or, I got home from work at 8 o'clock. The kids are running around. Nobody's had dinner. Don't you ever think about, maybe doing with the kids? On and on it goes. But what I found is that backfires for women in a big way, because then the husband gets agitated and you're in this push and this pull, and nobody wins. So one of the things that can really help women make their husbands or help their husbands be more engaged at home and be a better dad really is to learn to speak differently to them. Speak rather than going in with your guns loaded and wanting to teach him a lesson about how responsible he needs to be, and that he really needs to parent when you're not there. You go to him and say, "You know what? I know you're a good dad and you really want to be a good dad. It would really help the kids and I if you would, maybe give them some hot dogs or make some hamburgers or something before I get home, because they always get hungry at 5." There, you've gotten through your message. He's more likely to do it, and you're less angry, because when we speak positively, you're less angry. So I think that if we really want to help ourselves and our husbands and our kids, which whenever you get along better, you're helping your kids, we need to check our tone. We need to check how we feel beneath the words. And we always know whether we're agitated or not. So be honest. And then we need to check our words. Here's a case in point. I used to be almost a professional interrupter with my husband because I talk a lot more than he does. And he would be talking to our kids, and I'd be listening to him talk to our kids. And I would say in my mind, "No, no, no, you don't talk to girls that way." And I'd swoop in and I would jump into the conversation and basically use a tone of voice that said, "Dad doesn't know what he's talking about, but I do because I'm a woman and I get you." What did that do to my husband? It put him down, and it communicated to the girls, "Mom knows better than dad." Another real game changer in our relationship, which is so simple, it's silly. But I did this. Men need respect, and they need to be respected in order to have a healthy relationship. And I realized I usually got home from work before my husband did, and we work in the same office. But I would get home and he'd walk in the door and he'd yell, "Hello, hello." And I'd be sitting there reading, "Hey, how are you?" from the other room. And I thought, that's not very respectful. If I were walking in the house, I'd want somebody to say hi to me. So then I started, when he walked in, hello, I put my book down, whatever I was doing. I walked to him, looked at him, and said, "I'm so glad you're home. How was your day?" The whole evening went completely, that man couldn't help me enough because he felt respected and he felt that I was paying attention. How simple is that? So you pivot how you talk, you change your tone of voice, and you change the words you use. It transforms your relationship, and it's a great role model for your kids, because my kids now are grown and they'll say, "Mom and Dad, you are such good role models for us now as young parents. We want to do that for our kids." And it's all about, they watch everything you do and say with one another.
Oh my gosh. Even as you said that, like, "I'm so glad you're home. How was your day?" And
Yeah.
like getting a greeting like that, complete, no matter what kind of day you've had, you're just like, oh. Like,
Exactly, because home should be your safe, warm, wonderful place. And kids feel that too. If they walk in the door and you're doing something and just a minute, just a minute, just a minute, and then they go up to the room and you haven't even said hello, how much worse do they feel? And so, how simple is that? It's so simple because I would always chew on my husband because he never listens. He never listens. He never listens. A lot of times I talk too much and I would repeat myself and he'd say, I love you. And I'd say, no, you got to say it 5 times. Why? I said it to you. Why do I need to say it 5 times? Because I want to hear it. And then I get mad if you didn't. How silly is that? So much of just tweaking our language builds us up. And that's why we need to pay attention to how we're talking and when we're talking and what our tone of voice is. It really works. It really
yes, it
works.
does. It really works. It goes a long, long way. Well, Meg, as we wrap up here, what is new for you? I know you said before we hit record today that no more books. You're done writing books, which by
Mhm,
the way, I've loved every single
mhm.
book that you've put out. But what's new for you? What's in the future?
Well, thank you so much. I've actually written 7 books,
Wow.
and, yeah, I know, and I think I have nothing more to say, which I'm sure I do. And I've spoken here, there, globally, all this kind of stuff. But now what I really want to do is I want to talk directly to dads. I want to be the encourager. I want to tell them what their kids want. I want to tell them that they can meet their kids' needs no matter where they are in their relationship with their kids. I've worked with kids whose fathers are in prison. I've worked with kids whose fathers are millionaires. I've worked with the NFL guys to sort of say, here's what your kids want. And so that's my heart. So I'm starting coaching, dad coaching, and I'm starting, one on one. But what I really want to do is build a group, a community, a small community, and then a large community of dads where we come on and we talk. I answer their questions. I talk about a topic like, what do your kids need? And I go bang, bang, bang. Or, and a lot of what I do, I think, is assuaging dad's guilt and helping them come out of that sense of feeling insecure that they don't have what it takes to be a great dad because every dad does. So I'm doing coaching and anybody can find out about my coaching on Meeker
That's so
Parenting.
awesome. That's I can't think of anybody better to do this kind of work, especially with all the experience you've had. This has just been awesome. I wish you the best of luck. I know you're absolutely gonna kill it, and you're gonna do so well with dads out there. But that's awesome. That's great news to hear.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you
You
bet.
you can
I would
always
love
join
to.
it later.
Let's do it.
Yeah, yeah. But it's really, again, it's gonna be a safe place for men to feel encouraged. And like one father said to me, I was speaking to a large crowd, and he said, "What makes you a father expert?" I said, "I'm not a father expert. I'm a kid expert,
Mhm.
and I know your kids. And so my job is to let dads see how their kids see them. And then I'm
Yeah,
yeah, my work is done."
I love that. Gentlemen, we're talking to Dr. Meg Meeker, the author of 7 books, and this is her third time on the podcast.
Mhm.
You'll be able to find all the links in the show notes if you head on over to thedadedge.com/482, which, by the way, by the time this drops, Meg, it'll be my birthday. So
Oh, happy birthday. I will be
thank you.
very kind and not ask how old you'll be, but that is so great.
Well,
Yeah.
how old do you think I am? You can
I'd
be
say
honest. Can I
38.
just give you a hug? I'm gonna
How
be
old are
49.
you? No way.
Way.
No
Yes. Yep.
way.
I'll be 49 this year. Actually, as this drops, I'm 49 today.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so
That is
yeah,
so,
but yeah,
yeah. Well, and I truly, we've done a lot of things together. I wasn't making that up, and I wasn't just trying to give you kudos there, but I really had no
thank
idea.
you.
That's pretty
Thank you. I
cool.
appreciate that. Yeah, people, I've had people ask like, you don't look 49. I was like, I drink a lot of water. That's about it.
That's it. Yeah, but when you're doing what you love to do, you stay younger.
Yeah,
That's
I
what I
agree.
feel like. People look at me and go, "Oh, when are you gonna retire? When are you gonna retire?" I'm like, "Well, I love what I
Yeah,
do,
you love what you
and I
do.
don't golf, and I don't play tennis, and I don't have as many friends as I probably should because I love my work and I love
Yeah.
my family, and so that keeps you young,
Yeah,
and
I
don't you feel
do.
that way?
I love what I do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it for the life of me. And but yeah, it definitely, like, I remember hating what I used to do. And I was in the medical field too. I used to sell surgical device sales. And there was a part of me, I mean, actually, I take that back. I loved doing that. I really, really
Mhm,
did. And then there were some seasons though, especially as I got later on, where I really felt this pull to do this work. And the love for this work
mhm.
was so much more powerful than the love of that work,
Yeah.
and that's
Well,
really what it
when
was.
you see the fruit, when you see for me to have somebody come back a few years later or somebody read my book and, and they live in a different country and just say how it opened their eyes and it gave them so much encouragement. That's what it's about. Um, you don't have to record this or whatever, but I just want to tell you a really fun story.
Yeah, let's
So
hear it.
I used to go around before COVID speaking with Dave Ramsey, and we do these big conferences in these major cities. We went to LA and we gave this talk in this real old theater, one of the famous LA old theaters. So the guy that mic'd me up, okay, the older guy, um, I said, "Hey, who have you mic'd up before? I just gotta know." And he said he gave it this and this, and he said Michael Jackson. I said, "No way,
No
no
way.
way. Can I touch your hands?" How stupid is that? So anyway, but we started talking. It was very, very nice, older gentleman, and um, I went out, I gave my talk on dads, and I showed a lot of pictures of dads you've probably never seen it, Larry. It's on my website, but all of these dads coming home and their kids running to them, and it's a real tearjerker. And I went backstage. He went to take my mic off, and he looked at me, and said, "Dr. Meeker, is that really true?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "Am I really that important to my kids?" I said, "You absolutely are." We talked for about 15, 20 minutes. His kids were estranged. He felt horrible about himself. He felt his life with his kids was over. And the look on his face when he realized that maybe his adult kids still wanted him was priceless. I don't remember anybody else at the conference, but I remember that man.
Mm,
And I really feel like if I went to LA and did that just for him, it was worth it. I'll never forget his face.
that is so cool. That's such a good story. And that, that's, and I'm going to keep this in the recording because
Okay.
we might have, I'm sure we have guys who are listening to the show and they've got, tense relationship with their kids or a estranged relationship with their
Yeah.
kids, or it's not where they want it to be. And I
Mhm.
think that that's a proven fact that it's never too late. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't meet my biological father till I was 30,
Mhm.
and we have a relationship now. And I think on paper you look at that and it's like, well, that would have been impossible. But I'll tell you, like, I really do think that it's never too late. No matter how
Never.
old we are, no matter how old our kids are, how old we are, whatever water is under the bridge, like, I think that there's always this powerful yearning with kids to they want their dad in their life,
They
period, you
yeah.
know?
They want their dad. They want their dad. It's never too late for dads, and I've talked to a lot of dads, and particularly some really wealthy men who spend a whole lot of time at work making their fortune, and their kids hit 18, 20, 25, and they don't even know them, and the kids don't want them, and they're grieving, and I said, "Hold on a minute. It's not too late." "Yes, it is. You don't know." I said, "I do. I do. I do. I've talked to a lot of kids adults who are estranged from their dads, and they always want their dad back. Maybe they want their dad back first to fight with their dad, to get past that, to air their grievances, and then to go deeper with their dad. So, every father needs that hope. Every particularly divorced dads who get the shaft when
I
it comes
agree.
to spending time divorced dad. We should do, I'm sure you've already done shows on divorced dads, but
Mhm.
they need a
They
lot of
do. I
encouragement.
agree. Even in our group, we have 3 call teams dedicated just for single dads or dads going through divorce themselves, blended family call teams as well. Cause yeah, it's different. The dynamics are different. The needs are different
Mhm.
for sure.
Very yep, yep,
Yeah. But
yep.
thank you again so much for coming on the show. It's always, always, always such a treat to have you on. Always learn something new. And thank you for all you're doing for men out there, for families and dads out there. It's really remarkable. Thank you so much.